Most players think tilt is just anger. And when I realized one thing, then that it isn't. Tilt usually starts much earlier than people think, long before frustration becomes visible. And the dangerous part is, most players don't even understand what actually causes it. Because the real reason people tilt has surprisingly little to do with the losing itself. And by the end of this video, I can almost guarantee you will see frustration completely differently. Most players think tilt only starts once frustration becomes visible. But honestly, tilt starts way earlier than that. Frustration, confusion, pressure, ego damage, and helplessness. The visible reaction is just the final stage. Real tilt happens internally first, and competitive games are extremely good at creating this feeling. A few days ago, I was playing Tekken 6 on my PS Vita, and eventually I reached Azazel, the final boss of that game. And after losing a few rounds, I thought to myself, okay, I should implement more low attacks. But in older fighting games, the CPU on highest difficulty reads your inputs, so low attacks didn't work. Then I said to myself, okay, then let me use more movement by sidestepping. But that didn't work because the AI started using homing attacks. Then I said to myself, okay, then I should whiff punish. But that one didn't work because the boss didn't have that many minus frames. Then I tried counter hits. And guess what? That specific boss also has super armor. So let's analyze what happened here. Every single time I adapted to the situation, the game removed another option. And at some point my brain reached a very dangerous state. Because I started thinking that there is no way to beat that boss. And honestly, every competitive player knows that feeling. Not just in fighting games. In Hanshounen 1896 as example, there are also a lot of situations like this. You grab a bounty, you start rotating, and suddenly some guy inside of a random bush shoots at you with silenced weapons. You don't see him, you don't hear him properly, you don't know where he is, and you don't know how many there are. And the more this situation happens to you, the more your brain starts to believe that there is nothing you can do. And that's where tilt becomes dangerous. Because emotionally, your brain stops searching for solutions. Ja, but then why am I still so angry? Pretty simple, because humans handle failure surprisingly well. But we struggle enormously with helplessness. Losing because somebody played better can usually be accepted. But losing while feeling powerless, that creates frustration incredibly fast. Because your brain wants control. It wants answers, logic, cause, and effect. And when games temporarily remove that feeling, players become emotionally extremely quickly. And that's why people instantly scream things like broken, impossible, trash game, lucky, cheater. Because emotionally, the brain is desperately trying to explain the situation and why it felt unwinnable. And the worst part is, the more emotional players become, the less possible it is to look at the situation analytically, which usually makes the situation even worse. And this is where things become interesting, because there's actually a huge difference between a situation that is genuinely unfair and a situation that only feels impossible emotionally. That Tekken boss as example, honestly, that's just badly designed frustration. Sometimes the answer really is get lucky and don't tilt. But multiplayer games like Hanshounen are completely different, because most situations actually do have a solution. That bush camper example is perfect. Most players react with, that's just unfair. But analytically, that's not really the case. First of all, you do not owe those players a fight. Your objective is not to win every gunfight. Your objective is to kill the boss, grab the bounty, and extract. That's it. And if somebody wants to camp in bushes all day with silenced weapons, fine, just leave. Extract and win the match. Because the second those players decide to chase you, they lose their biggest advantage. The bushes disappear, the concealment disappears, and the safe position disappears. Now they have to cross open terrain. Now they become predictable. And now the fight is in your favor. And suddenly the entire situation changed. But sadly, tilted players usually don't reach this state, because emotionally, they already decided that the other person is not playing by the rules. And once your brain reaches that point, analysis stops completely. I think the most important question a player can ask himself is this: why exactly am I angry? Not generally, but very specific, because different frustrations create different kinds of tilt. Sometimes you're angry because you keep making the same mistake. Sometimes you're angry because you don't understand the enemy. Sometimes you're angry because your ego got attacked. And sometimes you're angry because reality exposed the weakness you didn't want to admit existed. And that one hurts the most, because many competitive players build their identity around skill. So when the game proves otherwise, the emotional reaction becomes immediate. And that's why players say things like lucky, broken, trash game, or cheaters. because the brain desperately wants an explanation to protect their ego. And I think many players massively underestimate how dangerous their inner dialogue actually is. Because your brain listens to you constantly. Every match, every mistake, and every death. And over time, your thoughts slowly become beliefs. Think about how often you say to yourself, I'm so bad. What is wrong with me? Of course I lost this. I always fumble. I hate myself for doing this every time. People think those are harmless emotional reactions, but repetition changes identity incredibly fast. And eventually, your brain stops separating losing a match and losing self-worth. And once that happens, competitive games start becoming emotionally exhausting. Not because of the game itself, but because every mistake suddenly feels personal.
Yeah, but if I'm already angry, I'm not thinking logically anymore.
And honestly, every competitive player knows that moment. The point where rationally thinking slowly disappears. You queue instantly again. You ego peak angles. You push fights that are not in your favor. And you stop thinking patiently. And mentally, you tell yourself, no, I'm still trying to win. But honestly, most of the time you're not. You're trying to force the game to give you your confidence back. And that's where people spiral deeper and deeper. Because eventually, your brain becomes too emotional to properly analyze anything. And this is where many people misunderstand mental strength. Sometimes mental strength means recognizing, okay, I'm getting too emotional right now. And then simply stopping. For an hour, maybe an evening, or maybe even longer. Because once your brain actually calms down, analysis becomes possible again. And by the way, if you enjoy short high-density analysis like this one, focused on why competitive games affect players mentally, and where emotional decision-making destroys improvement, that's exactly what this channel does. Subscribing makes sense. I think the brain handles failure surprisingly well, but it struggles enormously when it feels like there is no solution anymore. And that's why tilt feels so horrible, because for a short moment, your brain stops seeing the game as a problem you're able to solve. And honestly, that's exactly why understanding your own reactions matters so much, not just in games, but everywhere we go.